Welcome to Declutter for Change, the podcast where we clear the visible and invisible clutter from your mind, body, soul, and home to make room for the life you actually want to live and love. I'm your host, Heather Clark, and today we have our guest, Rebecca Thomas. Rebecca is a coach, writer, and guide for women who are done organizing their lives around other people's expectations, emotional states, or unspoken rules. Her work focuses on helping women identify where responsibility has quietly drifted off course and what becomes possible when they stop carrying what was never meant to be theirs. Rather than teaching strategies for improvement or change, Rebecca works on orientation, how women decide what's theirs to hold, what isn't, and how they move once that distinction becomes clear. Much of her work involves noticing the invisible agreements, roles, and stories that shape choice around work, money, family, and identity, often without conscious consent. Rebecca's approach is grounded, practical, and honest. It favors clarity over urgency and subtraction over effort. Clients don't come to her to be fixed. They come because something feels off, even if everything looks quote-unquote fine, and they're ready to stop overriding their own knowing in order to keep things run smoothly. At the core of her work is a belief that burnout and stagnation are not personal failures, but signals that responsibility has been misplaced. When responsibility returns to its rightful place, clarity follows and life begins to move again without force. All right, welcome, Rebecca. How are you doing today?
I'm doing amazing. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. Well, thank you so much for wanting to be basically our first guest on the podcast this year. And I just wanted to say very much thank you for that. And I would like to know what exactly got you into relationships with people?
What got me into relationships with people? Life
you into
itself.
doing what you do with life itself? Well, that's true. That was a silly question. But what got you into wanting to help people with relationships, wanting to get into who you are, what you do, and how you help women?
Yeah. Okay, so there's a couple of layers to that. I'll start with helping women. What got me into that? So the plot twist nobody ever sees coming is what got me into life coaching is being an Airbnb host. Yeah, so a few years ago, several years ago now, I was a work from home mom, parent of a younger child, single parent, working a work from home salary position, and was wanting to supplement my income, and started down this rabbit hole of things that might potentially help me with that, and landed on Airbnb hosting. And was like, oh, that sounds amazing. I could do that. And I started hosting people in my home. So I did not have separate houses. They came and stayed with us. And so it was through my experience with my guests, who were complete strangers from all around the world, that I realized that there was something to how I was able to sit with people, like to hold space for them, hold conversation with them, but do so in a way where not only could they be completely and freely themselves with no underlying agenda, but also be able to challenge their perspective just enough through reflective questioning for them to be like, maybe there's something else to this. Maybe I can change this. So that's the coaching piece. The women piece, I am a woman, shocker. I'm also the oldest of 7, and I have 5 younger sisters. So women are near and dear to my heart. But I also think that there's something in this day and age where we need more powerful women. I always say strong is surviving, powerful is thriving. So we need more powerful women getting out of our own ways, not really dancing the dance to all of the things that we have for so long, but truly embodying the things that make us powerful as women, and using that to change the world. So that's the woman part. And then as far as relationships, everything that we are in contact with, we are in relationship with. So that's just kind of a natural part of, as a coach, how do I relate to this thing? What's my identity relevant to this thing? And just really taking a look at that and how it shapes both us and our external world, and then working with that. So yeah.
Awesome. Okay, first of all, I do have to say, did you just say 7?
Yeah.
Or 7
Yeah.
in your
But split
family?
family, split family. So I'm the oldest ultimately by 7 years. And then on one side, there's 2 sisters, other side's 3 sisters and a brother. So yeah, but all of my
A
sisters,
lot of women in that family that you had. Did you notice okay, so I don't know when all of you got together at one point, but
yeah.
did you notice that as you were growing up as women versus, the one poor guy that had a whole
Yeah.
lot of
Oh,
estrogen
he
in the
was just fine. Don't worry.
But did you notice at all that the women were doing things because of how they were told to do? And that's what a lot of the audience is about, oh, as a woman, oh, you should be doing this. You should be doing that. As women, we need to be clean up the house. We need to make sure all of this
Yeah.
stuff. Did you notice that with yourself plus all of the other women? Because that's a lot to notice,
Well, add on top of that I was raised in a very religious home as well. And we had 4 generations in one Baptist church. So like there was also that element of like it was being told what to do / being modeled what to do / being conditioned right what to do, right? Whether it was the microculture, the macro culture, and all of them intermingling. But yeah, definitely I can't say when I was younger that it really hit my radar as much. But I'm not unique in this fact, but I know one of the things that sets me apart is I was raised with my dad. And I was also very close with my grandpa. And so one of the things that I love about me and what I do and my perspective and how I approach things is I'm generally a bridge no matter what. So I can see and embody feminine, masculine, logical, feeling, like I can bridge both sides of those worlds. And then whoever I'm talking to, depending on where they're at with that or where they're getting hung up, be able to interpret it in a way that they can see what we're talking about, like where the limitations are, but then also understand and begin to integrate or embody the pieces missing from the other side, because there's pros and cons with both.
Perfect. Yes. And the other thing too, I'd like to know is for you, because you said that you grew up with all this stuff, maybe not as much you, but did you notice your siblings, specifically the women, if there was a point where they were like, wait a second, and they paused and they thought, is this really what I want? Was there a life that you were like, whoa, whoa, whoa? Like when you were saying you started on Airbnb, was there a point in your life that you just all of a sudden sat back and go, is this what I want? Or is this what I've been told I should want? And from that point, what did you do for yourself, let alone the women that are in your family, to bridge that from what you thought you wanted versus what you actually want?
Yeah, so I'm going to speak to my own experience. When I think about my sisters, my family, the church I grew up in, so many amazing women and beautiful elements of caretaking and community and togetherness and feeling and all of the things. But I think that's so personal to every single person. Like when they have that awareness, if they have that awareness, what it looks like, where they really start to pause and say, I can say, being a woman in my mid-40s, like I think there's something to that midlife. I like how Brene Brown calls it an unraveling versus a crisis, because that's what it feels like. It feels like we've been tied up into all of these things that shape our identity. But then we get to a point where we're like, wait, whose is this? Because I did not consent. And so we really, go ahead.
Was there a specific time for you that's what happened and your brain went like, oh my goodness? Like for me, I know I went through a divorce. And it was going through like right before the divorce, right before I left him and stuff like that. It was for me, oh my goodness. Okay, I've got the 2 kids, older son, younger daughter. I've got the general manager job. I've got the husband. I've got the house. I've got everything that I'm supposed to have.
Yeah, that
but
should.
why do I still feel this like weird, like I'm not there yet kind of feeling? And that's when I realized I'm like, I've been doing literally everything in my life how I was supposed to do it.
Yeah.
So have you noticed anything that with yourself? And if you can share, and it's not
no, I can share all the things. So The interesting thing about me, and again, another thing that kind of sets me apart, but it's part of how I'm able to see and coach the way that I do, is that part. There's a couple of things. So I was raised primarily by my grandparents when I was younger. And the unconditional love that you are generally more inclined to get from your grandparents versus your parents, right? Like we get the parents our parents never had, because they're beyond in years, different priorities in life, things slow down a little bit.
Or whatever. Yes.
And so that part of my life, and I've thought about this so much because my last grandparent passed away last year, and she was the one I was closest to. And so there's been a ton of reflection just in the past year from so many moving parts of my life, and really thinking about it. One of the things that has always given me this inherent self-trust, knowing who I am, even when I don't know who I am. So I think about when I was a teenager, some of the things that they really allowed to root in me were my ability, like my presence was enough for everything else. And so that was something that really gave me a pulse on when things weren't mine. And when you're younger, like you're still so easily influenced, right? So there's still elements that are going to creep in there, but then add on top of that, that for me personally, I mean, one of our core human needs is to have autonomy, right? Well, I'm that times 1,000. And so one of the things I uncovered last year was I have basically spent like probably my early teens up until the last year rebelling in some way, but rebelling wasn't being like, overtly disruptive and loud and those things. It was more just this stubbornness. And part of what I uncovered and really sitting with that and exploring was when I was younger, I did not feel like I had autonomy over a lot of things. And so my approach to retaining autonomy was to rebel against something. And then I carried that into my adult life. But when you ask about like, do I remember a time? Like, I remember as early as 11 being like, wow, this doesn't make sense. This is not my thing. And not in okay, now we're going to push all the way against it. But just like in my mind, I was like, it was like pattern recognition gone wild. It was like, this doesn't quite make sense.
That you were always somebody, even as a child, that trusted her instinct, that trusted herself.
Yes. And I think that was because of my grandparents.
And that's it, because of the grandparents that taught you like, hey, you're enough just as you are.
Yeah.
So how can women who are listening to this podcast, how can they gain that? Because I know a lot of women that come into my world, I'm sure that few that come into your world as well, they don't trust that instinct. They don't know how to. That relationship that they have with themselves is so broken that they're not understanding when something happens and then they get the instinct, but then they question it because of their upbringing. So you were able to trust it because of your upbringing. They're questioning it because of their upbringing. How can they bridge that gap so that as they're listening to this podcast, as they heard what you said, that, oh yeah, it is autonomy. It is, I got to trust myself. I got to learn that. How can they do that when it comes to their upbringing, their right now, etc.?
Okay. So I'm going to back up in order for us to move forward with this. And so what I want to say here is that does not mean that I have had it all figured out or always like honored who I am, right? Because I didn't know who I was. And I think that it's really important to also put on the table, like there's layers. You can work through a certain relationship, a certain level of your experience with yourself. You can work through different chapters of things, and you might address it in one area or at one level, but there's usually, it's like the onion, the cliche onion, right? Like there's always more layers. And so the beautiful part is no matter how many layers or how many areas of your life or how many times that same thread, that same lesson shows up, in the very least, what we get to do is continue to calibrate that thing. So even when we're learning it at a different pace, a different level, like we're still calibrating it. And generally what happens then is that lesson that we're learning also gets shortened because we learn how to recognize it sooner, or even to be able to avoid it altogether. So there's that piece. And then another piece of it is, so self-trust. It's like when you were talking, and as I think about relationships, and I've been reflecting on, what our conversation was going to be about today, one of the things that I feel like really erodes our self-trust as women is our lack of boundaries. But I also think that we are so acclimated to creating boundaries that are actually walls. And this is another lesson I've learned about myself in the past year too, is I would say, excellent boundaries. But I was listening to something a few months ago that was talking about how available I am. And I really started, like, I always take things like that, and it's just the smallest thing, and I sit with it and I rumble with it and I think about it and I turn it back and over. So I was thinking about, like, how available am I? Like, whether it's to money or a partner or a family member or any of those things, how available am I to those things? And I really started to think about it, and I was like, this is getting a little uncomfortable because I have excellent boundaries, right?
That feels a little odd. This feels a little not as it is it gets that feeling of this doesn't feel safe, but it's not that it's not safe. It's
Correct.
that it's not an everyday occurrence. So therefore your body's like, ooh, what is that? Just like the excitement and nervousness are the same feeling. You just got to go, okay, when I'm nervous, you just got to go, well, no, I'm excited to do this now. I'm excited to go on stage or whatever it is. So how did you realize that, okay, that is something that, okay. So
so I am a huge lover of nature. I need it for all the things, and it's something I'm always immersed myself in. And so I take a lot of lessons from nature. And so I've been really, like, manifestation's been big on my radar for the last few years. Last year was a big year of really looking at, like, okay, why isn't this working? Guess what? Common denominator right here. So what do we got to figure out? And so I spent a lot of time digging into it, but in a different perspective, I would say. And then also allowing nature to teach me. Because when we think about manifestation and we think about abundance, right? The universe is abundant. We hear that all the time. Abundance or scarcity. No, the universe is abundant. Okay, what does that look like? What does that mean? And I would look at, like, the day-to-day things that I was seeing in actual nature, in the trees, the animals, the water, the wind, all of it. And I keep coming back to, it's like the universe is abundant, and all it's ever trying to do is get back to harmony. So, like, it's not some tit for tat transactional, I have to do this to get that. It's literally, how do I show up in this moment and share my truth, and then let that move and influence what happens beyond, instead of trying to control it. And so when I think about boundaries, I love Prentice Hemphel's quote that goes something along the lines of, boundaries are the distance, or boundaries are how I love you and myself at the same time. And so when I think about women, especially women that feel guilty about setting boundaries, because I'm responsible for A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? Like the whole alphabet. So if we really center ourselves in, okay, how do I love myself and you at the same time? That really starts to put in perspective what we're trying to do in order to be validated or needed or not feel abandoned, and instead say, okay, what's loving to myself and this person at the same time, which makes room for both. And so I feel like self-trust is an issue, because how do we trust ourselves when we don't honor what we need? And that's what the boundaries are for. So when we set boundaries, usually with ourselves more than other people, that allow us to shore up what we need and still allow ourselves to be loved by ourselves and with others at the same time, that's where we start to trust ourselves, which then gives us confidence, which then allows us to be more authentic in the world.
So my question now is, you said when women, when you realize what do you need, how do you help women with that, with what they need. Because as women, I know I'm a mom, and any
Uh-huh.
moms that are listening right now too are going, well, I've never really thought about my needs because I think about everybody else's needs
Uh-huh.
first. So how do you help women, like is there a practice you give them? Is there something that you, like meditation, whatever, that you teach them to go, hey, this is where your needs come first
Mhm.
before, just like the plane, you got to put your
Mhm.
mask on first type thing. What is it that you teach them so that they know that this is their need, not somebody else's need?
Right. So I say where I always start with that is pay attention to what you feel. So like, where does guilt show up? Why does it show up? What
Yeah.
is it trying to tell you? Where do you get angry at yourself for how you responded to your son? What caused that, right? Like probably wasn't whatever you think it was in the moment. What actually led up to that moment and made that bubble burst? And how can you go like reverse engineer? Okay, I don't want to do that again. A, B, and C contributed. And if I can navigate those things and take care of those things, that means on the other end, my son gets a different version of me.
Yeah. And
And so that fulfills, yeah, so
I
that
know my son
fulfills,
got a different version of the like early
right,
30s
that
version of
fulfills,
what he gets now. So
yes, yeah. So that fulfills loving ourselves, but loving them at the same time. So that's a perfect example. But, it's so easy to say, I don't have the time. I'm too busy. I'm that. Okay, that's cute. So how do you expect to change it? By piling more on top of everything else? So it's also not trying to BS yourself about what you can and can't do, and then really being honest with yourself about what the end goal is that you actually want. And so that's, like I said, why I always go back to feelings, because feelings are information and we tend to run and hide and deny and push down, but they're literally telling us something all the time. And I know a lot of women are really scared of like their feelings overtaking them.
mm-hmm.
But the beauty is in when we really start to sit with them and feel them, we start to recognize and get comfortable with the discomfort of having them, which makes them not smaller, but it like smooths the edges. Does that
Well,
make
the
sense?
other thing too with feelings too is women aren't like, I'm more somebody who, I love a good rage room. Like I love like a smash here or whatever, because there's just something like, I've even taught this to my daughter and everything, and where you're sitting with that feeling, and instead of sitting with it and let it just sit and fester,
Mm-hmm.
let it out. You have to let it go. That's where I teach a lot of my clients is you cannot sit in, like you sit in the discomfort, but
Mm-hmm.
then you have to move it. Whether that's exercise, whether that's a rage room, whether
Mm-hmm.
that is a good old cry, whatever it is, you have to let those feelings out. You have to
Mm-hmm.
release them, because again, like you were saying, when you bottle them up, guess what's going to happen? Like you said earlier, is that thing that you did with your son that you did that it actually wasn't in the moment.
Uh-huh.
It's not the reason that you're actually mad. It's because of all those things that you kept going and kept
Yeah.
pushing down, saying, no, 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 I shouldn't have anger. Oh, no, 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 I shouldn't have that. And you keep
Mm-hmm.
pushing it down until that moment that it snaps and you become this like, then you look like the quote unquote crazy one,
Mm-hmm.
because you just had an outburst of all the feelings you didn't allow to come through and let out.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, how do you feel that that relates also to romantic partners too? Because
Mm-hmm.
let's think about it. We're coming up to Valentine's Day, whatever. Well, actually, when this podcast comes out, we're actually going to be past Valentine's Day. So sorry, anyone who's actually
Close
celebrating
enough.
it. But with romantic, and I'm not just talking about male, female, I'm talking female,
Mm-hmm.
female, and even if I have male listeners as well, male, male, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. How do you feel that if we bottle it up and we don't tell our partner exactly how we're feeling, or exactly, those are my boundaries, going back to the boundaries as well,
Mm-hmm.
and we just let it bottle up, what do you think the consequences are? And I know we both have either lived it or watched it in
Mm-hmm.
real life. What are the consequences that you've seen?
I mean, so many things, right? Like it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and the elephant in the room is the thing that never gets talked about, and it ends up ending a relationship or destroying a home or being something we pass on to our children. So I think that's one of the things, especially with moms, I always say is, okay, what do you want for your children?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you want them to embody that, guess what? That means you have to lead by example, because it doesn't matter what you do or what you say, it's what you do. And those are the things we pass on. But I mean, all kinds of things can happen. And again, it feels like it's just that avoidance or that not dealing with or the trying to tiptoe around. Like, I have really come to feel in the last year that self-expression is probably the most important thing we can do. And we're so scared to express ourselves for a million different reasons, but it's literally keeping us from being able to relate to one another, let alone be in relationship with one another, which are two different things.
Yes.
And so whose life are you living? So that's the ultimate thing, right? Is like, whose life are you living? If you're not self-expressing, if you're not being yourself, you're not feeling your feelings, you're not letting your feelings inform you or your life or your relationships, what's the point?
Yep. And then that goes into the consequences. If you aren't being who you actually are authentically and stuff like that, then you're with somebody and you're showing them a face that doesn't even exist.
Yeah, and walking around feeling resentful or depressed
because you didn't express yourself, saying like, okay, here's my boundary. I don't like that this happened. This made me feel whatever the case may be. And then you expect them to read your mind. And it's like, yeah.
Or even understand your perspective, because I think that's the other thing we forget a lot of times too. And I was in a relationship where this happened, where I was a majority self-expressing. I can see now that there were places where I wasn't being great at that, but for the most part, self-expressing, being authentic, communicating things, not compromising who I was, but their inability to understand that or meet me there was the thing that was the wedge. And that didn't make me course correct, but it also, like, it created a ton of resistance, and eventually the relationship fell apart. Well, looking back, I can see what was actually happening, but in the moment I would have told you I was doing everything right.
Yep. Well, because in the moment we look at it and we're like, okay, when we're right in the relationship, when we're right in the thick of things, we can't take our mind out because our emotions are attached to it. So when we do that, it's like, well, no, I did everything I was supposed to do. Like, you know, especially as women who are very like, okay, logical, like we can make our emotions logical. So that's like, oh, no, I did that, I did that. No, I was good. But then when we're, like you said, when you're out of it and then you go, oh, wait a second. I see what
I have an analogy that might help, because what I was trying to get to with that is different things are going to trigger different people, right? Different beliefs, different identities, different, all of the things, values. And so it's easy to forget, I feel like, in this day and age, because we don't do it or talk about it enough. It's easy to forget that, like, just because they're cohabitating or in proximity or in relationship with you doesn't mean that they know, like, how well they know you depends on how well you express yourself, honestly, right? And truthfully. And so if we're not doing that, they can't understand. And it doesn't mean that everything needs to be understood either, but that also means you don't trust it enough to share it with them, right? That's that vulnerability piece. And if you don't trust it, and that's the place you're building things from, that's what it's creating on the other side too. It's like they can sense something is off, and how they navigate that is going to be up to who they are as a person. But there's still going to be some kind of disconnect where there's something that's either not communicated or not understood or something along that lines, because their lived experience and what's informed who they are is completely different. And so if we don't let them know what that looks like from in here, like, how do we expect them to
our heads and our hearts, by the way, for those
so how do we expect them to know what to do with that if we can't even tell them, right? Like, how do we expect to get our needs met, because we can't meet all our needs ourselves?
Yep.
So, like, how do we expect them to meet the needs or fill the needs and meet the needs that they need to if we can't even tell them what they are?
Well, and the other thing too, I have found that with myself, I expected, and we'll say a romantic partner, I expected the romantic partner to understand and to meet those needs. But I can't expect the partner, like I can't expect him to understand things that a woman could only understand. So that's why I have my best friends. And that's a different relationship
Mm.
that I have.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, oh, right. I can't expect you to understand this part of me because you've never lived it. You've never experienced it. So
Mm-hmm.
therefore, I'm now going to choose a different relationship and expressing that to them, saying, like, listen, I'm
Mm-hmm.
this is what's going on. Here's where I'm at, but I'm not expecting you. I'm just giving you communication that this is what I'm happening, but I'm going to go to so and so
Mm-hmm.
because they would understand it more. They can, and I'm not asking for it to be fixed. I'm not asking for it to be
Mm-hmm.
whatever. It's just women to women, I find have such a different connection and relationship because of just like a man to man.
Oh
We
yeah.
can't we can't express, to a man or help the man in something that he's going through that only men have ever gone through. So with that, how can women, like how do the women that you've helped, whatever, how can they express or how do you allow them to express themselves so that they can like say, hey, listen, it's the same with boundary.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I need to XYZ, but I'm not leaving you out of it. I just need to go to this person instead. How do you help people like navigate those type of relationships?
Oh my gosh, there's so many layers to this. So I feel like, first of all, what you just said is such gold, and I think it's something that we can forget sometimes is one person cannot be the end all be all.
Yep.
So when we put that pressure on them in the relationship, we're automatically setting ourselves up for failure. That is so unrealistic, especially in this day and age. But I think the line we have to be really careful of is, yes, we need both of those. We all need men and women shaping our perspectives and our experiences while still centering from ourselves.
Yeah.
At the same time, you have to be really careful about, am I going to this person to reinforce my fears, my biases, or do I just
Mm-hmm.
need a space to vent, to get it out, to verbally process? Do I need somebody that can challenge me and help me see my blind spots so I can go back and do better and be better? So it's definitely recognizing those things, I think, is really, really helpful too, but definitely making sure you have a tribe that can support you. And then beyond that, there's so many different things that can be done when it comes to that. And I think it's funny because as you were talking, and this is one of the things I've really had to not only realize over the last year, but then work on myself, is we tend to go like from one end of it to the other, where it's like, I'm not asking for my needs. I'm feeling this way. I need to do something about it. Okay, now I need to like communicate and be vulnerable and set boundaries. And we can get so caught up in trying to do it the quote unquote right way
Mm-hmm.
that we make it so much harder and messier than it needs to be, when literally, going back to what I said earlier, it's literally expressing your truth from love in that moment.
Yep.
And remembering, like, I am human, they are human, this is a human experience, there's no right way to do this. That doesn't mean I just get to be a complete jerk, right? Like, this isn't about being malicious, but emotions are normal. So if I'm angry, I can be angry without taking it out on somebody. If they are uncomfortable being with anger, that's a separate issue. But
Yep.
me being angry or excited or confused or needing clarification has nothing to do with how they respond it. And so that takes me back to, it's literally, what is the truth, and what is your truth in that moment, and how do I express that? Expressing that's the most important thing, because it gets rid of all this, I need to say it just right, and because humanness is fluid too. Like, our boundaries should evolve, and they're different depending on like capacity and values and seasons and all, and even who I'm dealing with in the moment. But we spend so much time trying to create this like one size fits all approach to this one element that we forget. I can literally just meet the truth right here, right now, and stop trying to manage both sides of this relationship, share my truth, let the other person meet me there, and let that shape what's moving forward instead of trying to be the sole manager of that.
Yeah. So with that, here's my truth, here's what it is, I'm going to tell them. For the women listening, how do they know when they're in that romantic relationship? When is it time to go, maybe this isn't working moving forward?
That's tricky.
Mm-hmm.
Because every case, every chapter is going to be different. That's a very intimate and relative.
But is there like something in their body that you've noticed with any of the women that you've worked with, anything where it's like they're trying
Okay,
to...
I've got something for you.
Okay.
If you were talking to your best friend or your little sister or your niece, and they were telling you what was happening in themselves in the relationship, how would you advise them and take your own advice?
Ooh, there you go. There's probably going to be the quotable for good.
Because we deprioritize ourselves.
How, if I saw my daughter in the same relationship that I was in, and she came to me with the same issues that are going on in my head and my heart, all that stuff, what would I tell her as her mom, let alone as another woman? Is what would, so that is fantastic. I like that. I love that. And I guarantee you our listeners are going to as well. So whereas the whole case, we've got our friendships, we've got our relationships, our family. Yeah. Actually, you know what? We haven't gone on family. When there is a family dynamic with the relationship with the woman that, like you grew up with the church and stuff like that, and I grew up with church, whatever, and I separated from that long ago as well. But when it comes to family who's trying to pull them back in, trying to be like, no, you need to be here. You need to do what you were raised to do, what a good woman does and stuff like that. How do they put that boundary between them and their family so that their family, A, gets it, but that they don't feel that they've lost themselves as well throughout that whole...
Like, tricky again. I'm going to say this is tricky, right? Because it's so layered and nuanced, and I'm also going through this deeper calibration of that in and of itself. And I'm very good at boundaries. I'm very good at staying true to myself, honoring what I need and want, being in relationship with people. But I'm at this level now where it's like, I think like some of the language you use and some of the language I hear, and going back to that rebellion piece, right? It's so easy to get caught up in rebelling or resisting a dynamic, a person, whatever, right? And so my big word over the past year in realizing that rebellion has been reclamation. So how do I go from I'm resisting this thing in order to honor myself, keep my autonomy, have some sense of control, to what is reclamation? Reclamation is taking something back on your own terms. And so when we think about that, it completes a different perspective where it's, okay, I'm not pushing against this, because what we resist persists, right? So so that's the thing to keep in mind. So the golden thread I always try to use with that and everything truly is, what am I doing out of love and what am I doing out of fear? And when I set boundaries, the same thing applies, right? If I'm doing this because I'm afraid, right? Because I'm afraid of losing control, or I'm afraid of them trying to tell me who I should be or doing it wrong or whatever, is that fear or is that love? And if I was practicing love, and if you need to put it in the perspective of talking to the best friend, the daughter, the niece, or whatever, that can help you get back to, if I was doing this in love for myself and them, what would that look like? And that puts a completely different spin on how you set boundaries and how you interact with those things. Because again, it's easy to put up walls and call them boundaries. I've done it.
Yep. Oh, I know how do we. Everyone listening has done that, and especially since you said it in that way, I was like, oh yeah, I said it was a boundary, but oh no, that was definitely a wall. Like there was like, oh, anything hit that, and that was a wall, and that was done. It wasn't even a matter of I allowed the conversation to happen or anything. It was like, yeah, no.
So it's the meaning we put on it too, right? So because that's the other reason it's so tricky, is because sometimes we need a complete separation. Sometimes we need that space. Like I likened this to another story of mine, which is like when I was 7, I broke my arm, took my cast off at school, like just took it off, right? And the reason, like, that part isn't really relative, but I think about a cast, right? Because we put a cast on to protect something that's broken.
Okay.
So when we don't have a boundary, something is broken. So the boundary set in place, like the cast, in order to give it shape and give it stability, support, while we practice that thing, because it's a process. It's not a one and done. I set the boundary, and if you ignore it, no, it's up to you to reinforce it. But if we're in reinforcing it, expecting it to be broken, that's where a lot of the resistance comes in, versus just staying centered in yourself, standing your ground, taking the meaning out of it and reclaiming it. But if we leave the boundary on, if we leave the cast on for too long, what is underneath atrophies. Yep. So how do we keep the thing from atrophying? How do we, and it's specific to not just people, but different dynamics, relationships, like all of the things. There's no set in stone, here's your check boxes 1, 2, 3, like this is how it's something we have to continually check in with it about ourselves and feel and pay attention to. And like, you can always change your mind. You're human, you're gonna screw it up, but that's how we meet each other. That's how we are in relationship with each other, is not by getting it right and being perfect, but by embracing that mess and choosing to meet each other in the middle and work through it together.
Yeah, that is beautiful. That's actually a fantastic spot to also end this as well. But before we go, there are things that I would like to ask. So my whole entire thing and the whole podcast, what is the word I'm looking for? The word has lost. But basically it is, the theme of the podcast is, you cannot change without knowing that you need to let go of something. You cannot change without knowing that things, the old version, the new version of you, come together, and that's where the clutter shows up. And everyone has clutter, and it's the mind, the body, the soul, and the home. So I would like to ask you for one, I call them the tiny shifts for today, for the mind, the body, the soul, and the home, for our listeners, based on your experience with working with women and what you do.
Yeah. So I'm going to preface this with the overarching, the umbrella thing for all 4 of those things is addition by subtraction. Not what do I need to do more of, but how do I give myself or this space for clarity? So that's the addition, because clarity is where you meet yourself. That's how you figure out who you are, what you want, what you need, how you're feeling, and then how to create that out there. So that's the first thing I would say. With your mind, I would say, how do you get clarity? It's not by seeking opinions. It's not by ruminating. It's not by thinking your way out of it or prioritizing logic. And it's also not by judging what you think. So just noticing what you think, letting it pass through, not giving it meaning. And then if you need to make a choice, make the choice based on love. So clarity for mind. Body, I would say, pay attention to what you're bracing against. So whether that's a person, a certain theme or element in your life, a certain feeling, what you're managing, but just pay attention to when you're bracing and where it shows up in your body, and literally just start with that, like building an awareness. Soul, I would say my biggest thing is always, I think it's easy for women to discount boundaries in particular because it feels like it's self-centered. So I always reframe that and say it's not self-centered, it's centering from self.
Ooh, I like that.
So who am I as a person? there's so many different ways we could interpret soul, but like, what is my consciousness, and how does that impact the world, and vice versa? So how do I center for myself, needs, wants, priorities, values, and take that out into the world instead of conforming to what's out there trying to shape me? And then for home, I would say just give yourself the ability to be present, whether it's with yourself, with your family, pets, creating some kind of sanctuary in your home to give yourself that space, especially for your mind to just like ease in, be relaxed. But yeah, just carving out that sanctuary so the rest of you can have something to like settle into and breathe.
Awesome. Those are wonderful. And all of those will be in the show notes, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you so much, Rebecca, for joining me on this podcast. And I look forward to hearing a lot more about you on socials and everything like that. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you. This was so much fun.